All right, so guys, I have unearthed another little gadget. This is a college football conference realignment simulator, and you can search this on Google and actually find this. This is a full breakdown. You can see putting teams in different places. How do the conferences stack up? What does the overall map look like? We've got the metrics here. This is a major comparison. And guys, the first comparison we're going to be looking at, it's the current Big Ten versus the Big 12 expanded up to 16 teams. So guys, what I've done is I've taken Arizona, I've put them in the Big 12. I've taken Arizona State, I've put them in the Big 12. I have taken Colorado, and I have put them in the Big 12. And I have taken Utah, and I've put them in the Big 12. And you can see the Big 12 versus the Big 10, both teams at this point with 16. I'm going to do a few different comparisons. I'm going to compare a Big 10 with 20 teams versus an SEC with 20 teams and stuff like that. But you guys can just see the overall look of the Big 12 conference compared to the Big 10. So the ESPN FPI number, you want it to be higher, I think, because it's the overall rating. Yes, it's the overall rating. It's not the rank. So you think like being number one is the best. It's the rating. So you want a higher rating. You can see the Big 10 at 16 teams outperforming the Big 12 in basically every metric. We can compare the Pac-12 here, and it does take a little while to load. But I mean, this is why the Pac-12, pretty much under any realignment circumstance where they're losing more teams, they would simply die. I mean, they have 6 teams at this point. And you're pretty much done. I think once one thing happens, meaning the Big 10 takes teams from the Pac-12, the Big 12 takes teams from the Pac-12 will die out. And the next thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be pushing the Big 10 up to 20 teams and pushing the SEC up to 20 teams and doing a little comparison. All right, guys, so first things first. Because there are a lot of metrics here, let's just compare the Big 10 versus the SEC, both with 16 teams. This is totally legitimate, real. We know USC, UCLA is going to the Big 10. We know Oklahoma and Texas are going to the SEC. So both with 16 teams, the FPI favors the SEC heavily. There is a little bit of bias in the overall FPI rankings. I mean, they've got like Auburn right now as the number 10 team in the country preseason. It's ridiculous. But you can see like the SEC clearly in terms of football, on-field product is ahead of the Big 10. In terms of overall ratings, in terms of overall academics, the Big 10 is ahead of the SEC at 16 teams. That's why the Big 10 is going to be getting a TV deal that is slightly better than the SEC, assuming both of these conferences remain at 16 teams. I wanted to touch on a thing that I was talking about yesterday, and the idea that ESPN has a big motivation to keep the ACC together due to the money they have tied up in the ACC network. A lot of people were saying that, well, no duh, they're going to try and keep it together. They've got that crazy great deal when it comes to all those teams. Guys, I think ESPN has the self-awareness to understand that that grant of rights deal, the overall money, will be renegotiated. It's either going to be renegotiated or they will vote to dissolve the conference. There is no way teams like Clemson, Florida State, Miami are going to sit on their hands until 2036 with the grant of rights deal they currently have. My whole thing is, if ESPN and their number 2 executive is coming out and saying, listen, we've got a bunch of money in the ACC network, we want to keep it together, there is motivation for ESPN if he is telling the truth, if they've got significant money in the ACC network and it's going to take a while for them to recoup it. I kind of thought they could just transition into a Big 12 network, but it looks like with the way everything is sorted out, they want 4 bigger conferences, or at least the ACC to remain alive. That's what, at least from what I can see, what ESPN wants. Now, obviously, Clemson, Florida State, they're not going to stand for that. They're going to say, you give us more money right now, or we will try and get enough teams to dissolve this conference. Whether or not they'd be able to do it, I think eventually they'd be able to, because it's a horrible deal for most of those teams in it, and you would need 8 teams overall. So that is just my overall take on that. I'm going to push both of these conferences to 20 teams. The Big Ten will be adding the teams we already discussed. It's going to be Oregon, Washington, and yesterday, there was a crazy article from 538 yesterday talking about basically laying it out there and saying Oregon and Washington are no-brainers for the Big Ten to add. I know some people were concerned. There was a report that the Big Ten cooled on Oregon, Washington. Is it even worth adding those teams? It is worth it. Those teams bring significant value, and then the other 2 teams I'm going to be adding is Cal and Stanford. I am not adding Notre Dame in this comparison, at least not right now. And then for the SEC, I'm going to have them going into the ACC. That's the next big question. Does ESPN really want to keep the ACC together? Will they be able to? Does it even make sense for the SEC to expand if this is all about money? It feels like if the Big Ten gets to 20 teams, the real motivation for the SEC to get to 20 teams would be to compete with the Big Ten. It's not about money at that point. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe if they add Clemson. The problem is you're not adding any windows. Like, the Big Ten has a clear path, if they add more West Coast teams, to creating every single week, having that 4th window, that 10:30 at night window. You're giving yourself possibly more marketability, possibly a better deal, maybe even bringing ESPN back to renegotiating a TV deal with them to give them the late night game with the SEC. If they add the ACC schools, you're not adding any windows. You're not adding any different time zones. Is it even worth it from a financial sense? It's just like you're having a little contest with the Big Ten. I don't know. It seems to be the one motivation is money. Is it even worth it for the SEC to add Florida State, Clemson, Miami, North Carolina? Because that will dilute the overall earnings every team makes going to 20 teams. But that is what I'm going to be comparing. All right, guys, this is the full Super Conference comparison, what a lot of us expect to end up happening. This is the 20-team Big Ten versus the 20-team SEC. And once again, when it comes to overall football, the SEC does come out on top in this comparison. When it comes to overall marketability, I think the Big Ten is set up better. And now you take a look at the map, a little bit more balance. You've got those 6 West Coast schools. You can have your own West Wing. And you can see this is all super in-depth. The 2 super conferences just far out and away. Everyone else, there's the Big 12. The way this sets up, the ACC significantly down after losing 4 schools to the SEC in this model. The Pac-12 basically doesn't exist anymore. And then all the group of 5 teams are down there. I would also have, if you really want to be real about it and just destroy the Pac-12, you could have Washington State heading to the Mountain West. And then you could also have, not that this really matters. And this is the problem. It lags a little bit. The other problem. And then you have Oregon State heading to the Mountain West as well. And then we can do a 24-team comparison next. And if these conferences end up going to 24 teams, I would start to think that the Big Ten would take more ACC teams. And you would see the Big Ten looking at teams like maybe Georgia Tech, maybe a team like Pittsburgh. Virginia is a great fit as well. And I don't even know who the SEC would take at that point. Probably, like Louisville, I'd say, would be a team the SEC would be interested in to go to 24. But at some point, it just doesn't make sense in terms of overall revenue. And as you can see, they've got all of these metrics. The one thing that this site is missing, unfortunately, is the TV markets, things like that, because that's a big thing that goes into realignment that this site does not seem to have. So realistically, if you're looking at the overall comparison of every conference, the SEC at 20 teams, the Big 10 at 20 teams, we can actually bring the Big 12 up and make it 3 conferences of 20 teams. So in this case, the Big 12, and this was kind of my end game prediction, which this is the real thing where it's hard to see this happening, but this is what would have to happen for even the SEC to add the ACC teams, because you need 8 teams in the ACC to agree to dissolve the conference, meaning 8 teams in the ACC would have to have, spots available in preferably the Big Ten or the SEC, because they would make more money and it would make sense for them to leave. The problem is, if we put 4 teams from the ACC into the Big 12, does that financially make sense? Why wouldn't NC State just say, no, we're going to make more money staying in the ACC than diluting the the Big 12? But that's what we're going to do. We're going to move in. Well, let me see how I want to do this. I think how I had Virginia Tech. No, it was Louisville. I don't see Louisville in the Big 12. We'll do NC State. We'll do NC State to the Big 12. We will also do Louisville to the Big 12 just in this scenario. Get the Big 12 up to 20 teams. We will do Syracuse to the Big 12 as well. Again, this is fairly unrealistic. I just want to get 3 conferences of 20 teams. I don't think the Big 12 has the money to spread out through, their overall TV contract and dilute it 20 ways. I just don't think they have the money. And then we'll do Virginia Tech to the Big 12 as well. And then we will see the comparison. I would say, really, I think what you get is the 2 super conferences, and then the Big 12. Well, I mean, the Big 12 isn't that far behind. The main issue, the number, it doesn't look that bad for the Big 12 right here, because we're not talking about TV numbers. We're not talking about ratings. It gets real ugly for the Big 12 when we start doing that, because the Big 12 does not have any mega team that can carry their ratings and things like that. So the Big 12 Super Conference versus the Big 10 Super Conference, you can see when it comes to football, it's the SEC, the 20-team SEC, the 20-team Big 10, and then the 20-team Big 12. They're pretty evenly divided, or evenly factored and cut. I mean, the Big 10 has every metric here over the Big 12 when it comes to football, and then also, obviously, when it comes to the markets, the SoCal, the Columbus, Michigan, things like that. But this is just an interesting thing to look at, and you can do a number of different things. The only thing, it takes a little while for the site to actually kick in and really work. I just thought it was interesting. The other issue, I mean, look at these, the map. Yeah, it's just, it makes no sense. I mean, they're not conferences. You can't have a conference that's basically throughout. I mean, both of those conferences are just a joke. You've got one team in New York in the same conference with teams from Arizona and Utah. So it is amazing. But guys, either way, that's going to do it for this realignment video. Make sure you follow me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description. I'm, of course, the Depressed Ginger. Thank you for watching.